What's up, everybody? We got Friday Face-Off here, and every couple weeks I'm bringing on my hockey think tank teammates to talk about some real-world youth hockey stuff that's happening at the grassroots ground level of the game. So, Vex, we got Maddie Thomas and Steph Dukes on here with us, and today what I want to ask you guys about and all the work that you guys have done with so many different youth organizations, and I've said this a lot, but like so many organizations are just organizations in the fact that they like wear the same jersey. You know, there's not a lot that binds the whole of the organization together. And with that comes a lot of like inconsistency of the different experiences that people can have within a club. For example, you know, we were talking just about like how you can have a 10U player who them and their parents are having like the greatest time ever with this organization. And then you can have a 12U player that's having a completely opposite, you know, type of experience. Even though they play at the same rink, there's the same club leadership and board, you know, it's the same jersey. And so I guess to start, like, where does that come from? Like, why do you feel like there is, you know, potentially with some clubs, so much inconsistency with how the game is delivered from one kid to the next or one family to the next?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head there, right? Are you building an organization or just a temporary alliance of squads, right? Many youth orgs aren't actually one organization. They're just a loose collection of independent teams where each coach kind of functions like his or her own small business. And that's not a knock on the coach. It's structurally, that's what they're counting on. That's not a bug. That's a feature, right? That's how the organization is aligned. And each team's going to have its own culture, its own standards, its own communication style, its own practice philosophy, parent expectations, discipline, developmental priorities, scheduling, finances, logistics, right? Some of these start to become real markers for a parent's experience with a season, a player's experience with a season. And you might be wearing the same jersey as last year, but everything else is changing year to year. Everything depends on what coach you get. And that's not organizational leadership. That's, again, sort of that temporary partnership. And if you're wondering if you're in that boat, you know, some questions to ask yourself. Parents or organizations, could your parents accurately describe your organization's philosophy regardless of what squad they play for? Do they know your mission statement? Do they see that mission statement maybe in some visible ways? Does the organization have a defined identity beyond winning? Coaches, ask yourself, do you know what's expected of you this season? Do you have some accountability back to the logo on the front of the jersey? If the answer is no, then again, you're not joining an organization, you're joining a coach. And we tell people all the time, coach is the key. Find a great coach. That's the number one predictor of the experience you're going to have in a given season. And it's a pretty effective umbrella in a storm. It can be necessary and sometimes good as a shortcut for families to go coach shopping. But we're working with partners to help organizations have a boatload of those coaches, veteran coaches who have found sustainability because of the things you've put in place as a leadership group. Young coaches who can come in and quickly acquire the tools and be shaped into those veteran coaches because you have the resources to do it. Coaches somewhere in between who have some experience but need to get onboarded. You can help them adapt and incorporate into your organization's philosophy. That's where you can really start to build cohesion. That's the difference between, as you said, that collection of similar jerseys or a true organization.
Steph, you've obviously worked with a lot of organizations and you've been a part of the leadership group of others. What in your kind of administrative, you have so much value to bring and so much knowledge and perspective on the administrative side from a leadership perspective. What can like a board or what can like the leadership of a club do to help build some of that like cohesion, camaraderie that we see the best clubs all have?
Well, first of all, we can't all have Jeff Lavecchio as our hype man, making sure that everybody is on the same page culturally and bringing the good energy. So short of that, until we figure out how to clone Vex, short of that, it's to Maddie's point, it's not about finding 5 great coaches and hoping they stay forever. That's not a solution. It's building standards, right? It's how you communicate with parents. It's how you develop players. It's what the culture looks like, how you hold people accountable. Those shouldn't depend on which bench you end up on, who's your coach. That, to some degree, yes, there's individuality amongst the teams, and they're going to have their own microculture. But from an org perspective, there needs to be some underlying cultural expectations, or you're never going to move the needle to being a really great club. And a lot of that's because consistency is what creates that trust. It's that stability will help generate that trust, even when you're not doing anything actively. You're not proactively doing anything. You're living your culture. You're living your brand, right? So the great orgs really reduce that variability. And again, I'm not advocating that you take away a coach's ability to impact his team in his or her own way. That's not what this is. But if you look at the organizations that really last, the common thread is they've engineered some of that variability out, not the individual coaching, but the experience variability out of it, not the personality of the coach, not the culture, just the randomness of, how was your experience? Oh, well, ours was good, but yours might not be. It's going to depend on who you get. That if that's true for your org, you need to look inward before anything's ever going to change with respect to the experience your families have.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. And how, when you look at the board level, you have to have good admins to be able to survive. And then I also think that parents need to understand a little bit more how much work goes on behind the scenes that those admins do that never get seen. And they'd have a little bit more appreciation for how the sausage get made and how things get done, as far as anything little from the jerseys getting ordered to the ice schedule getting scheduled to coaches getting paid to any tryouts being administered, anything and everything in between. How do you see that kind of relationship between admin and kind of board organizationally, and how they work and how they help the organization to function properly, and then with kind of parent expectations and having some consistency that goes through that?
I think transparency is huge in that respect. And it's, having if you've got a board that has, I'm going to call it specific seats, right? So you've got somebody that is in charge of equipment. You've got somebody on the board that's in charge of fundraising and marketing and communication and tryouts and whatever the structure is that you have. If they're visible on the website, and then you've got consistent communication, whether it's every time somebody registers for a program, there's sort of a boilerplate, let's call it, at the bottom of every confirmation email that says, have questions about, want to trade in your equipment because your kid's outgrown his skates and you want to trade and get new ones. If you've got that kind of a program, or you want to know when the used equipment sale is, you sort of in a very concise way, you're letting them know that there are people in certain seats that can help them with certain things. Enough people that go through your registration process. I mean, the people that are coming in brand new, they're going to be overwhelmed at everything. But if they're with you, through a season, through 2 seasons, they're going to start to see that predictability in, there are people I can call. And any logical person's going to go, okay, these people are making it go round, right? And then putting out, whether it's monthly might be a little bit too much, quarterly, whatever, whatever tempo works for you. Just kind of I hate to use the word newsletter, but a did you know, a club update, whatever you want to call it, but where you're really highlighting some of those things that the board is actively doing, so parents can start to appreciate just the amount of things that there are to juggle. And even if it's scheduling stuff, sending an email saying, we don't have our practice schedule yet, or here are your first 2 weeks. You're going to have everything else, but here's why you don't yet. And it's oftentimes because the rink hasn't finalized their schedule. They haven't given you your contract yet. You've made the ask, but you haven't gotten the, just the minutia of that, figuring out how to share that in a way that's consumable, knowing that everybody has email fatigue, whether, you're sharing some of that on social media, but a lot of that goes into the communication plan that your club has. And that's one of the things that we touch on through our blueprint, right? Is we try to give orgs some more tools for their toolbox to help them be their best within their structure, whether they need help with that structure or they need help on executing their structure. We sort of meet them where they're at. But transparency is huge in all of that. And eventually parents I think start to understand the amount of work that goes in behind the scenes, whether that's admins, board members, full or part-time staff, whatever it is. They start to see that in real time year over year.
Yep, absolutely. All right, guys, 10 minutes are up. If you're interested in learning more about kind of how Matt and Steph in particular, but the Hockey Think Tank are really helping clubs to streamline things and operate in a way that builds trust, like we've been talking about here, and makes everybody excited and really proud to wear that logo, let us know, reach out. And we've been working with a lot of clubs in the past, will in the future here, and great stuff, guys. Appreciate it.